And now I would like to introduce our speaker for the evening, Miss Marion Lobstein. Marion is a founding board and life member of the Virginia Native Plant Society and professor emeritus at Northern Virginia Community College. And she's the botany chair for the Prince William Wildflower Society and has authored articles for Wild News for 40 years, as well as offered workshops and field trips for that chapter and other VNPS chapters. And she'll be doing more with the Natural History Society of Maryland too, I'm excited to say. And for over 25 years, she's been conducting tours and teaching classes at the Smithsonian Resident Associates Program. And her degrees include a BSED in biology from Western Carolina University, MAT from UNC Chapel Hill, and an MS in biology from George Mason University. And she's the co-author of Finding Wildflowers in the Washington-Baltimore area and the video, end of the video, Spring Wildflowers in the Mid-Atlantic region. Okay, I could go on. She has so many things that she's done. And she's also going to talk about the app that I have on my phone to help identify wildflowers. And I am going to leave it at that and hand it over to Marion. Marion, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Elena. It's a pleasure to meet you on Zoom this evening and to be here. And I am looking forward to doing more programs for the Natural History Society of Maryland. I am very impressed with all you are doing and have enjoyed working with Bronwyn Mitchell Strong. And as of today, I set up at least one program for the archaeology section with Matthew Falk, and I'll mention that later. But tonight, the focus of this program is to let you know about the Flora of Virginia, both in the book form, the 7-pound, almost 1,600-page book my husband calls a doorstop, and then this app that you could put in your pocket if it's a phone, or backpack if you want it on a tablet. And these, either of them or both of them, I should say, are wonderful tools for plant lovers of Maryland, even though these both cover the state or Commonwealth of Virginia. My goodness, look at Maryland. I mean, we share so much of our border and our physiographic provinces. And I'll be making a point about that, or several points, as we go along. I'd like to dedicate this program tonight in memory of my two co-authors of Finding Wildflowers in the Washington-Baltimore area. Both of these women, Chris Fleming and Barbara Tufte, were dear friends and are both no longer with us. Here we are in 1995. Look at that young thing right there, Marion Lobstein. There's Chris Fleming. You may have known her from Audubon Naturalist Society or USDA graduate program, and Barbara Tufte, who was also with ANS. This is still being sold in your bookstore, I understand, and will give you wonderful places to go to enjoy our native flora. I mentioned the physiographic provinces of Maryland and Virginia, and I'm not sure how much detail you could see on your screen about this map, or of this map rather, but you can see how we share the coastal plain with Maryland, Delaware, how we share a Piedmont region, and also the Valley and Ridge region, the Blue Ridge, and the Appalachian Mountains, also with West Virginia and our two states. Here's another diagram of that showing perhaps in more vivid color how much we have in common as states. Here is Maryland, here is Virginia. And I grew up in North Carolina, so I was used to having these major physiographic provinces also. And so I felt very at home in this region for 50 years now. Very proud to say. And the main topic tonight is the Flora of Virginia. And this is an interesting map that shows percentages of color by color of the coverage of the counties in West Virginia, in Virginia, and in Maryland that are covered by the Flora of Virginia. And you see most of the counties in Maryland, indeed, are in purple as they are in Virginia, of course, and most of West Virginia. And this one area through here, sort of a teal color, turquoise color, is 90 to 95%. This is sort of a little quick capsule of my 78 years of life. And it's just like, where has it gone? And I am not going to read you this. And I think I can quickly go through this and in many ways summarize my life by books and now in the digital age with digital apps and other aids to identify and use with nature. Like many of you, as a child, I was fascinated by nature growing up in a small town near Charlotte, North Carolina. The family would go to the beach, and I really wore out my Zim nature guide to seashores and seashells. I did all of my nature Girl Scout badges and used these other wonderful guides. And I think many of us became interested in nature as children by using these types of books that are still available and very useful for children. However, I went from these to college, and at Western Carolina University, I took my first spring flora class my sophomore year with Dr. Jim Horton, and we used the Guide to the Vascular Flora of the Carolinas. I credit Dr. Horton for becoming a biology major. I knew I enjoyed nature and science of all sorts, as well as art. But once I had a class with Dr. Horton, I knew I was a biologist for life. And this book, The Guide to the Vascular Flora, introduced me to dichotomous keys and to plant taxonomy. And fortunately, in 1968, when I graduated and had just married my first husband, we were in Chapel Hill. I worked as a research technician for the federal government, but I also earned my first master's degree part-time, and I took a wonderful course with C. Ritchie Bell, who is now deceased, as is Dr. Horton. And we used the Manual of the Vascular Flora of the Carolinas. And I was just hooked. And when I moved to Virginia 50 years ago, I visited within the first year, the Audubon Naturalist Society bookshop in Georgetown that's no longer there. And later I spent a lot of time at Wood End and was a member of ANS. But with this first visit, I saw checklists to birds of our region. And I asked, are there any plant checklists? And the volunteer working there that day said, no, but why don't you make some yourself? Well, that planted an idea that I'll tell you about. It took a while for it to come to fruition, but I did just that. Another major question I had was if there was a Flora for Virginia. And I found out, alas, there had not been one since 1762. A small volume covering about 700 to 800 plants that were collected by an early Virginia botanist, John Clayton of the Tidewater area. Clayton learned from Mark Catesby, an English naturalist, how to press plants and identify them when Catesby was in Williamsburg for a while. And John Clayton, for whom Spring Beauty, Claytonia virginica is named, and that is my favorite wildflower besides Virginia bluebells and bloodroot and tear-out lily. It's hard to pick out just one. But anyway, Clayton sent a manuscript describing these plants in English, and also his 700 to 800 specimens of pressed plants to Catesby, who then gave them to Johann Friedrich Gronovius in Switzerland, a botanist and physician. And Gronovius translated the English manuscript into Latin. And he did give John Clayton credit, but he did not tell Clayton he was going to publish this book. It was published in Europe, and it was the first flora of any of the 13 colonies. And here is a map included in the Flora Virginica, and you can see the Chesapeake Bay, Maryland, Delaware, Virginia, so much of the area that in beauty we share. At Northern Virginia Community College, I started teaching at the Manassas campus, mainly assisting with labs, but started a small herbarium there. Then in 1976, I was offered a faculty position at the Manassas campus, and I was there for 35 years until I retired at the end of 2010. But when I began teaching wildflower classes, my vascular flora of the Carolinas, which I carried everywhere with me, we were a little too far north for that. So I started using Peterson's Guide to Wildflowers, Newcomb's Guide later on. Chris Fleming and also Stan Shetler introduced me to Newcomb's Guide. And later I did teach a plant ID class or two at the Museum of Natural History for Smithsonian Reston Associates. And Stan is a dear friend and very much missed now, recommended me to do work for the associates. Later, I found out about the Flora of West Virginia that was in 4 volumes originally, and then it came out in a single volume. And I started using that to supplement these popular guides. And when I taught field botany as a graduate course at the State Arboretum of Virginia Blandy Experimental Farm. It's a UVA field station. We use the Flora of Virginia, but all of this time I was telling students we need a Flora of Virginia. Later on, I started using and owned other references. If I were at home, I'm in Florida right now. My husband and I are snowbirds, and this is our motorhome. We lived in for 3 months, and we're returning to Virginia next week. But anyway, if I were home, I could take these off my bookshelf. It was in reach from my desk area in my study, and could show you Gray's Manual of Botany from 1950, from the early 80s, second edition of Gleason and Cronquist book. And then I found Herbaceous Plants of Maryland and Woody Plants of Maryland. And these I still enjoy the illustrations and descriptions. They're wonderful books. If you have copies, hold on to them. I checked on Amazon and also Abe's Used Books. Herbaceous Plants of Maryland is going for about $240, $250. Woody Plants of Maryland, about $80 or more. But these were written in the 1980s. And this is when plant taxonomy was still in a more traditional stage. But in 1953, a breakthrough in biology was made. That is the discovery of the structure of DNA. And since the 1990s, all of plant taxonomy and that of microbes, of birds, of all animals, everything has just been turned upside down and re-examined by relationships shown through DNA analysis. And some of this is a little hard to swallow sometimes. I've had quite a few of my favorite wildflower scientific names changed or families changed around. But hey, it's good for our brain to be keeping up and learning new things. So this is a little bit about where I was for a long period of my life through, let's say, the 1990s. But backing up a little bit, in 1977, I attended my first Virginia Academy of Science meeting. We celebrated our centennial last year. We were founded in 1923, and I think your group goes back almost as far, with 1929, I believe. But then in 1926, a Virginia Flora Committee was established with the goal of developing a modern Flora of Virginia. And when I attended this first meeting, I heard about this effort and felt so welcome, and later on became a member of this Flora Committee, and through that committee helped start our efforts for the modern Flora of Virginia. I'll be talking about in just a couple of minutes. Also, not that many years later, I was contacted about a new organization. It was first the Virginia Wildflower Preservation Society, with Mary Painter starting that. And I was asked if I would be willing to serve on the first board of directors. Meanwhile, out in Manassas, I was teaching a wildflower identification class, and one of my students, Nancy Arrington, had the same idea as Mary Painter, and she set up the Prince William Wildflower Society. I was a charter member of that, as were many of my students from those classes. And we became a chapter of what became the Virginia Native Plants Society. I served on a futures committee for the Native Plants Society, and one of our major goals was to support development of a modern flora of Virginia. So there were these dreams out there with the academy, with the fairly newly formed, in comparison, Virginia Native Plants Society. But how do we realize these? Well, one step was being taken during the 1970s, and that is an atlas was being pulled together, and an atlas documents the plants identified for a state or region, or sometimes even a country, that have been pressed, documented, stored in official herbaria, and so on. And Dr. Harville, Alton Harville, rather, he had been an active member of the Virginia Flora Committee, pulled together a new group, and the Virginia Botanical Associates, and they published these 2 volumes of Atlas of the Virginia Flora, which is now digital and online. I mentioned that idea that was planted in my mind about checklists at the Audubon Naturalist Society bookstore back in '74. Well, when the Atlas volumes came out, I started compiling checklists for the Northern Virginia area. I started with spring wildflowers, then trees, shrubs, woody vines, then summer and fall wildflowers. And these were carried in a number of parks, like Great Falls Park, where I was a volunteer on the Virginia side, and in Maryland, ANS carried them. Different regional parks in Virginia. We distributed these through the Native Plants Society, and it helped people have a pocket-sized version of a checklist for their area. And of course, much of Maryland, the Baltimore area, and Montgomery County, and so on. These were just ideal to use to see if certain plants had been documented or not. I'm afraid I was a coward and left out grasses, sedges, rushes that I now know a lot more about, but at least the showier plants were listed. Finally, in 2001, an effort that I had begun back in 1999 came to fruition. On behalf of the Virginia Flora Committee, I met with Alan Weekly in North Carolina. He was working on what he called the Flora of the Carolinas and Virginia. It was more like a guide, an outline. But he said if we could pull together resources, he would be willing to work on a flora for Virginia. Then here's Chris Ludwig. Chris, I saw at the Wintergreen Wildflower Symposium in 2000. And I told him about this idea. And I said, Chris, do you know anyone that might like to head up this project? And he said, well, let me think about it. Well, we met 2 weeks later in Shenandoah National Park. We hiked the Stony Man Trail at Skyland, and came back got a cold soft drink and sitting there talking, he said, I think I want to take it on. And by the next year, with support of Virginia Academy of Science, the Native Plants Society, Chris worked for Natural Heritage. His boss, here on the far right, was head of that group. Chip Morgan became our vice president. He was a former student of mine from Blandy. Nikki Stanton, president of the Virginia Native Plants Society, was part of our original board. Donna Ware, whom some of you may have met from Williamsburg, wonderful person who was co-author of the first atlas and very involved in that project. We all pulled together and Jocelyn Gallatin, who's not pictured, took this photograph. She was another student of mine from the field botany class, and she had Mike Garson from her husband's law firm help us with our bylaws and so on. So we were off and running as the foundation of the Flora of Virginia Project. It took 11 years before we pulled it all together and published a 7-pound book that's just under 1,700 pages long, almost 3,200 species, 1,400 illustrations, 35 tables, like comparing acorns of various oaks or hickories, very interesting tables. We pulled it together, and we could not have done it without our partners. And we have other very important partners also that I don't have time to go into, but Natural Heritage, Lewis Ginter, and just so many citizens did various work and fundraising and for the project. And I've tried to cut down on what I bring to Florida now, and I do not have a 7-pound copy with me. For many years, I brought it down, and I have a picture now of it. But I'm going to tell you about a video that some of us through the Flora Project put together, the education committee. We produced 7 videos that are modules. They're free, and I could show you in a moment where to find these. But literally, we walk you through the flora and tell you how to use it and give you additional resources for using the flora. I love this book. It's still used by hard copy all the time. However, 5 years later, we realized after this was published that the world was changing and everything was going digital and so on. And so we took the information from the manual and put it into an app and added so much more. And in the fall of 2017, at a tri-state native plant conference where the Virginia Native Plant Society, the Maryland Native Plant Society, and the West Virginia Native Plant Society all joined together to introduce the Flora of Virginia. And it's just, here's Spring Beauty of the cover. This is our emblem. memory or honor of John Clayton. But the manual, as much as I love it, has line drawings by Laura Getzinger and other talented artists, but no photographs. This has not only the line drawings, but the photographs, range maps, and an easy to use graphic key, as well as the so-called dichotomous keys, where you're given pairs of choices that lead you to an answer or onto other pairs of choices or couplets. A dichotomy, is it this or this? So this is the information. This also, the three authors are Alan Weekly, Chris Ludwig, and I forgot to mention earlier for the manual, Johnny Townsend of the Natural Heritage Program joined the group. And later for the app, Gary Fleming, who's now retired from Natural Heritage, joined. And then Bland Crowder was the wonderful editor and director of our group. But this, to be able to carry in your pocket, is incredible. Here's my iPhone. Here's my iPad, and Bronwyn and I have discussed my offering like a 2-session virtual class on using the graphic key part, and maybe an introduction to the dichotomous keys as well from the app. And we're working out dates now, but keep an eye out for that. And I hope all of you will be getting the Flora of Virginia app. But here are those modules I mentioned. And if you visit this link, and I wanted to show this to you, this is mentioned in the write-up. I have been honored to be given a website on the Virginia Native Plant Society called Botanizing with Marion. And one of the things on there are features is the Flora of Virginia work. And with my journey with the Flora of Virginia, when you bring this up, you will see links to each of the modules. And these are wonderful videos that are about 50 minutes long that will walk you through use of the flora, using the app, basic botany, taxonomy, keying, how to use a dichotomous key or graphic key, some major plant families, and habitats. We're very proud of these, and they're free for the use of everyone. So please take advantage of those different modules, and I think you will enjoy them. What I'd like to do, and I know that I'm running short on time as usual. I get so excited when I give presentations. You think I would get over this as I get older, but I don't. But here are the Flora of Virginia app categories. There's a browse category, the graphic key, dichotomous keys, botanical health, the reference libraries that has the 3 chapters on the history of botanical exploration in Virginia, the ecology of Virginia, and also 50 hotspots in Virginia to botanize in. reference library. We've just got so much in this. And with the browse section, you can search plants by their scientific or common name, by genus, by the family. You can create favorites lists. There's a lot you can do with browse. And here's some examples of spring beauty. We have actually 2 spring beauties in Virginia and Maryland, Claytonia Virginica, and then also Caroliniana. And once you click on one of these, let's say Claytonia Virginica, you're given the authority, the common names, the genus it belongs to with the scientific common names, and the family also. Spring Beauty in the past was put in the Portulaca family. Now it's in the Montiaceae, the Montia or miner's lettuce family. You have photographs, line drawings. You've got description of the plant. Any of the blue areas, if you want to see other species of Claytonia, or in the Montiaceae, you could click on those, a description, the phenology, when it blooms. I get word from friends back home, spring beauty's already blooming. The habitat description, the status, how common is it throughout the state, any comments, synonymy, different scientific names that were used in various references. You could go directly to the dichotomous key, or you can see if you would use the graphic key, what your choices would have been. There's also a section where you could see the range of species, and you can see that spring beauty is found in almost every county of Virginia except on the Eastern Shore, and that would be true for most of Maryland also. The graphic key is also, I think, a real breakthrough for the app, where you make very simple choices. Click on icons. These are the major groups of plants that are broken down. I'll not read all of these, but you click on one of these and then you answer fairly simple questions about where do you find the plant. In Virginia, you could use county, or in Maryland, you could use a nearby county. The habitat, time of year, color of the flower, the leaf structure, opposite, alternate, the margins of the leaf, simple or compound. Some very simple questions can lead you to a number of choices, and then finally, hopefully, narrow down your choices that you can then check out, and by using photographs and descriptions, narrow in. There are also dichotomous keys, and these have been greatly simplified from the manual. These are fairly easy to use, and I hope with this 2-session class Bronwyn and I are planning that I can give you at least a little overview of how to use these dichotomous keys. The botanical help, some basics on leaf structure and that kind of thing, the reference library with those chapters, even how to use the app to select native plants for your gardening and under different habitats. This is just chock full of so much information. And this is the simplified dichotomous key by major groups that makes it much easier to use. So to sort of wind things up and leave time for questions, I hope you're already beginning to see why you might want to consider purchasing for only $19.99 this wonderful Flora Virginia app. As you can see, Maryland and Virginia share similar physiographic regions. Therefore, their soils and the climates are similar. You can carry this reference source, the phone in your pocket or the tablet in your backpack. And also, if you don't have internet, the app resides on your phone or tablet. So if you're out somewhere and no connection, you can still use it. It's, frequently updated, and once you purchase it, you can keep updating it for no additional cost. It's yours, but I won't say eternity, but for the foreseeable future. And we're always adding to that. You can also, with the app, if you have older references, like using a Newton's or Peterson's guide or Herbaceous or Woody Plants of Maryland, you can cross-reference those older scientific names with the more up-to-date scientific names that are in use now. So I hope I've begun to convince you that this is a good thing, a good tool for you to have in your pocket or in your backpack or at home on your desk. And I've already made the point of the percentage of coverage for Maryland. When you get out in the far western counties, it might not match up totally, but it's close. I might add, up till now, we have not had a desktop or Microsoft or Apple version for the computer, but with the new board of directors and a new director of the project, Jenny Norwood, hopefully that will be available within a limited amount of time. I retired from the board after 20 years, but my heart, as you can see, is still with the project. It's been a large part of my life and a dream come true. I'd like to mention some other resources for you to consider checking out. Maryland has a wonderful plant atlas that I've begun to explore. Virginia, the digital atlas of the Virginia, and that should just be Flora. That's a little typo there. iNaturalist is good, although I did find mistakes there, but it's still another reference. To Google a plant to see what you can find out. Alan Weekly, the first author of the Flora, is working on apps to go with this Flora of the southeastern US. These are worth checking out. Botanizing with Marion, which I'm going to show you just super quickly. And then any of your other guides that you have, don't discount those. You can always cross-reference. there's so much information in print and online to check out. The botanizing with Marion, I hope you will visit on the BMPS website. 41 years of my articles on native plants, articles I've started writing about the taxonomic changes, the plant list, projects like the Flora of Virginia, the Finding Wildflowers book, a free copy of Spring Wildflowers of the Mid-Atlantic region is on there, the co-authors, and I donated it to BMPS. I love art, and I'm painting with watercolors now. Some of my artwork is there, Virginia Academy of Science, and more to come. This is under construction, really. So just 2 slides to finish up. I've mentioned the 2 session classes I'm talking about doing. April 3rd, I'm leading a wildflower walk at Stone Bridge along Bull Run in the Manassas National Battlefield Park. If you're interested in attending or more information, contact me by email. And on April 17th, I'll be doing a program for your group, the Archaeology Club, group of on Seeds of Change, the exchange of medicinal plants between the old and new world, which I think you'll find interesting. My last slide is to implore you to enjoy the beautiful flora of Maryland all year round. I want to thank the Natural History Society of Maryland, Bronwyn, Elena, for this opportunity to share some information about the Flora of Virginia Project, the manual and app, and I would like to thank all of you for watching and participating tonight. So, Elena, I've sort of glanced at my watch. Am I doing fairly well time-wise?
But we do have one comment and a question so far in the chat. Laura says that Chris Fleming was her first wildflowers teacher at Audubon Naturalist and Field Guru, and she's got your book.
I just loved Chris. So I saw her before the pandemic, before she passed, and we had such a special last visit. Very good friend. I learned a lot from her. Yes.
And then people are wondering where they can get the book. The latest, the 2017 version. Do you know if that's available for sale? The app.
The app. I meant to really advertise that. Good gracious. If you go to, if you just Google Flora of Virginia, you will go straight to the Flora of Virginia Project and you choose the app. And I failed to mention it is for both Android as well as iOS, meaning iPhone or iPads. And their versions are $19.99. And I thought I had that on one of the slides because you go to the App Store if you're iOS, and you go to Google Play if you are Android.
They put the link in the chat for folks.
All right, thank you, thank you. And I could send something to the follow-up, yes.
And then I also put a link to Botanizing with Marion in the chat as well.
Well, it's been fun putting that together and going back to old newsletters from 1983 and just seeing your life. But I want to share this information with people. So many people have shared with me. So there's nothing like these wildflowers, these native plants. And when I say wildflowers, I'm including the woody plants too, and shrubs, vines. But it's the spring flowers that really steal my heart away. Yes.
So the Flora of Virginia, that one, the Flora of Virginia 2017 is not a book. That's only
No,
the
it's an app. It is only the app. And the 2012 manual, it was reprinted. We sold out almost of copies of the first edition. There was a second printing with corrections in 2013. And that is still available. It runs over $100 now. We had it at a lower. We tried to keep the price down as much as we could initially, but the 1995 is quite a bargain.
So, Marion, I know you mentioned that you like the spring wildflowers, but what about in the fall? Can people look for wildflowers in the fall?
Oh, absolutely. And this is another thing Bronwyn and I talked about, is sort of having a program where I highlight some of the summer species. I've done programs on the milkweeds, which are so beautiful. And I saw one person that was her favorite wildflower was an asclepias. And in the fall, there's so many beautiful wildflowers. And some of our spring wildflowers even may bloom again. I've seen violets blooming again in the fall. And if you like violets, if you go to Botanizing with Marion, Native Plant Profiles, I went all out last year on violets. I just think they are glorious. And there's so many of them to tell them apart. But I did some microscopy on them and took pictures of the internal structure and really tried to look at not only the naming of the violets, but their uses, but also their fine structure as well at a microscopic level. So it's a lot of fun. Plus, they're dispersed by ants, the myrmidopori, which is one of my favorite topics too. Eddie, I could keep talking all night. Forgive me. Oh my goodness. And another great resource to learn about plants is not only ANS, but the Audubon Society of Northern Virginia. One of my students, Judy Gallagher, is now gone into insects that tie into plants, and she's given a program for your group. And the Botanical Society Washington is such an important group that I've really enjoyed being a part of that group for years.
We only have 2 minutes left, but Marion, do you think that there's a particular wildflower that just doesn't get the attention that it deserves?
Well, from many standpoints, that is a wonderful question. But I think in many ways it might be some of the parasitic plants like beech drops or saprophytic plants, like one-flowered cancer root. Everyone probably knows about Indian pipes, but every one of these plants has wonderful stories and how they were used by Native Americans. And another important feature I did not talk about is separating what is native, what was here at the time of European colonization, and what was introduced later. And now we have so much trouble with invasive exotic species. But these exotic species, like the dandelions, were brought over for good reasons, medicinal, edible uses, and so on. So every plant has its story. And I wish I had more time in life to tell more of the stories, but I'm going to do my best.
Well, we'll keep checking in.
All right.
Website.
And please put my email, make that available. And I often have people send me pictures of something they can't identify, or if I can find someone else like Chris Ludwig to help me identify it, or Sally Anderson with the NPS, or Nancy Veers. Those are both dear friends, and Sally, a former student. Teaching is the best. And sharing, yes.
Okay. Well, I think that is
Uh, Marion, thank you so much for being a part of the Natural History Society of Maryland. We really do appreciate your time and so much to learn about wildflowers, and thank you for sharing that knowledge.
Right. Well, thank you for the opportunities, and I'm going to join. I've got a membership form saved.
Awesome. Great.
Wonderful group. Best of luck to you.
All right. And thanks everyone for joining us tonight, and we'll see you on a future Must Learn Thursdays.